being adaptable, being flexible, whatever it is. When you talk about the OR, just ready to go.
We're scrub teching it. This is a scrub tech version of podcasting.
Like, I like it. Ready to go.
Stay sterile. Yes. Don't kill anybody.
And
go.
Yeah, don't contaminate anything. So don't give bad advice. It's the same equivalent, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now, it's time to roll back and start the first case.
It's time to kick off season 16 of the First Case podcast. And this season, we are going to be answering the question, how do I? And thinking in terms of all the different things that we have to know in the operating room. And I know for me, I can mutter this question to myself several times each day, sometimes even multiple times each case as we are doing different things. And sometimes it's just because we've been thrown into a situation with absolutely no idea what we're supposed to be doing, but somehow because we're certified or because we have a license or because we have experience behind our belts, we should know how to do it, right?
Or we have scrubs on. Yeah. I mean, honestly, in some facilities, it's like, oh, you have scrubs on.
Go.
Like, check. Yes. Oh, you must be knowledgeable, right?
You must know how to do this. Oh. And I mean, that's actually a really good example. Because for nurses, it's like, oh, you work in the OR, you've circulated, you've done this. Okay, well, we're short people and you have a pulse and you're wearing scrubs. So go scrub in and go do this case. And holy smokes, scrubbing is not that easy and you can't just learn on the fly. And yet those are situations that I've been in actually, and that other people have found themselves in as well. But it's not just nurses. Scrubs find themselves in a situation like this all the time. So what have you seen, Chris, where it's just like, oh, you're a scrub, do it.
Oh my, on the daily. Yeah. Can we just say that in life, like I think we're all in that position right now. You and I were talking. I mean, good God, I think our episodes are therapy sessions some days, right?
Yeah.
Just right now, I think because so many of us are just winging it in general. Right? And we're having to figure life out as it happens to us. And healthcare is probably not the area that we want to be doing that in. Yet so many of us are finding that. And I think it's because there are just shortages. Like we need people. And unfortunately, healthcare systems are having to get creative, but they're getting creative in the wrong ways. So, those of us who just want to do our jobs are having to find ourselves in sticky situations. And at the end of the day, I don't think any one of us wants to do the wrong thing. We don't want to take poor care of our patient, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And that's where we find ourselves asking these questions, right? And the list is so long. In fact, I think maybe we should do an entire season on it. What do you think?
I think that's a good idea. I think that we should definitely, and the thing is, our season's only 8 episodes long, so it's not like we could tackle every single question. So you brought up actually a really good point about life being just chaotic for us. And it's not just the OR sometimes where we find ourselves asking these questions, but even in all of healthcare. And I think a really good example, if we go back a year to the hurricanes that hit North Carolina that caused this huge IV fluid and irrigation fluid shortage. And what were we doing? We were asking ourselves, how do I make my fluids last? How do I take advantage of this allocation? And how do I make it work? And true to form, healthcare workers were ingenious and they came up with solutions. And made it work by answering the questions, how do we do this? But also, how do we do it safely? How do we do it effectively? And how do we make sure that our patients still receive top-notch care, even when we're dealing with something like a shortage? So that being a prime example of this kind of question being asked in real life and then being answered, and hopefully as effectively as possible, given that we had serious constraints with all of that. And I think some of us are even still feeling some of the aftermath of that shortage even now. And I still think about it when I spike my irrigation bags for a knee scope. I'm like, do I really need to spike this? Are we going to use it? I don't want to waste it. So obviously,
as you see it go down the drain,
as you watch, you're like, oh, I didn't need to waste that. So obviously,
I immediately think of a Turk, right? And you just watch it going down the drainage
oh,
bag as they're having a conversation, right? Yeah.
I'm like, please, oh no. So yes, so that's a really good life example of things that not just us in the OR, but all of healthcare tackled and addressed a question. But so when we think about all of the questions that we run across on a daily basis, maybe a good one to start with. And since you're the educator, I'm going to ask you this question.
Don't put me on the spot.
Of course, I'm going to put you on the spot. So, or how would we answer just the question, how do I learn in the OR? How do I learn, or maybe the better question is, because what people really want to know is, how do I learn without looking stupid, right? How do I learn and people don't think I'm dumb?
Oh my God. And the operating room is one of the worst areas to do it because we eat our young. Mm-hmm. And I know you and I have both said that. Like the opportunity to ask a question and to still have the opportunity to show what you can do is so slim, because the second you screw up, you're over, right? And there's a really good reason for that. You are not the prime focus in that room. The prime focus should and always will continue to be that patient. But at the same time, in order to get new bodies in there, you have to have it be a room of learning. So how do you do that? And I swear it is all foundationally based. So you cannot walk in there green as the grass is in East Tennessee because it is freaking raining, right? You have to go in there with a solid feet on the ground. And that is the responsibility of the educators that are teaching you. So these fly-by-night online crap schools that are out there, and they know who I'm talking about. Actually, they probably don't, because God forbid they learn something from an educational podcast. But there are these freaking programs out there. And that is not properly preparing these students. Your students, before they ever see the light of an OR room, they must be solidly prepared in aseptic technique. They must know the difference between what is sterile and what is not sterile. And I think that, here's my soapbox moment, too many educators walk in and they are so focused on surgical simulation that I'm going to teach my student how to do a breast biopsy. We're going to practice this procedure and practice that procedure. That's not the point of lab. Those students need to know how to do surgical hand scrubs. They need to know how to gown and glove properly. They need to know how to open sterile supplies without contaminating. They need to know how to gown and glove others. They need to know how to sterilely move in an environment where there are unsterile people. They need to recognize breaks and contamination, because unrecognized contamination is what kills people. If they cannot do those things and verbally be able to communicate when those breaks in technique have occurred, and then be able to critically think their way through how to fix them, they are never going to have a shot in the operating room.
No, they're not. Yeah. And our educators, that is a huge responsibility for our surgical tech educators in quality surgical tech instructional programs to bring students into our ORs and bring new graduates into our ORs who have that solid foundation. And the flip side too, the nurses that we're bringing into the operating room who don't get the OR in school. Not typically. They get it once they get to the OR. Hopefully they get a nurse residency, or they get a didactic and a training or a peri-op 101. And Lord knows that's not always the case either. So we've got this onus of responsibility on our educators, and Lord, all of our ORs don't even have educators to even make that happen. So going back to what you said, like, obviously there's a huge burden of responsibility too on us as the employee, us as the person working in the OR, to really take advantage and learn and know our stuff, right? We need that foundation. We need to seek it out sometimes when we don't have access to it. But then, even though we know, like, I mean, I have a brain fart every other hour, I feel like, at work. And at the same time, so like, I don't know, I'm going to make up a scenario, but all this, suddenly something is out of the norm. Like your scrub tech student learned how to do this in lab, learned how to do it in class. You do X, you do Y, you do Z, and it works. Except now they're in the case and it's not X, Y, Z, it's X, Y, A, B, 3, 4, 5. And so they have a question, and they know that they have that basic understanding, but they don't know how to get from what they know to over here. And there's still that fear, right? There's still that, okay, I know some of this, but I don't know all of it. So how do I figure that out? And how do I seek out help in the OR? And I'm not going to look dumb when I do it. So how do we ask the question in a way that demonstrates that we're not idiots, we just need help?
Yeah. So first thing I teach my students is read the room. If there's arterial blood shooting on the ceiling, now's not the time to ask a clarifying question, right?
Amen.
Yeah. So you're going to figure it out later, right? Secondly is don't get defensive and don't get accusatory. Like, always be inquisitive. So, and also listen more than you talk. Because if you are in a room, you can learn a lot just by paying attention, right? Like I was raised, like, God gave you 2 eyes, 2 ears, and one mouth for a reason, right? So I teach my students that too. Like, shut up and open your eyes and open your ears, because if you will just be present in the moment and breathe, you are going to learn a lot more than if you are running your mouth. And a lot of that is just presence and mind control and calming your nerves, because there are people in there that are so seasoned, so experienced. And if you will just be there and watch what they are doing, you don't always have to know what to do in that moment. That's why there are preceptors. That's why you have these fantastic RNs. It's why you have these surgeons, and God forbid you have the med student, but you can learn from what not to do too, right?
Well, that, and also realizing that you can learn from everybody. And if you're paying attention, and if you're reading the room, watching what's going on, there's opportunity to learn. Sometimes you learn what to do. Sometimes you learn what not to do if you just watch. But at the same time, it's all valuable education. And then the other thing that I found in my experience, it might not be in the case because we're spraying arterial blood on the ceiling and we need to fix that. That's not the time to ask a question, right? No. Right. I know this. This is not the time for me to ask my question about the layout of my instruments on the back table, But there's a time and a place to ask these questions. And sometimes it's after the emergency or after the case or later in the break room, like, hey, nurse so-and-so or surgical tech so-and-so, can you explain to me what happened here, or what did we do here, or why were you thinking, like those questions that can help you learn in a very non-threatening, not high stakes moment where the person you're talking to is very able to just focus on you and your question and really explaining what you wanted to know, because they're not also trying to keep somebody alive. And I think that that's a really good takeaway when it comes to answering some of these questions. Now, sometimes it's in the moment, like, I got to know, I don't know what I'm doing and I need to know this.
Help me.
Yeah,
sure.
Please help me right now. And there's obviously very important reasons we would do that too. But if it's just something we just need to know and something we're trying to learn and tuck away in our own brain, sometimes it's after the fact to kind of have that rehashing session with the more experienced person to help you see what they did or why they were thinking the way they were thinking, so you can tuck it away for your own learning later, right?
Yeah, agreed. And, after a code, like you and I both have been in codes, we always have a huddle. We always have a post-conference, right? Where we go over what went well, what did not go well, and there's a reason for that. And so I think that it's you should have that same mentality when you are a student. My students, we always have a post conference at 3 p.m. through Google Meet every single clinical day. And so it's a way for them to have, we have, it's did best, do better. So this is what I did today. This is what I feel like I did best. This is what I'm going to do better tomorrow. And it's an opportunity for them to ask questions about, hey, this is what I saw, or this is, this is something that happened. And not always is there an opportunity for them to ask that particular team. But guess what? They've got me, they have their clinical instructor, and we can sometimes help clarify what it was or to answer questions as well. But you have to provide those moments, but also that student has a responsibility to open their mouth and ask the question. And I think communication is the key to what you and I are both saying, right? Like, regardless of what your role is, if you don't ask, then you're never going to learn. And sometimes we keep our mouths shut when we should be speaking. And that's never the right answer, because you can't play Monday morning quarterback. You can't come back later and judge somebody for what they did, or say, well, I saw it, but, I didn't feel comfortable saying anything. Like, you're just as wrong than when you don't advocate. And I think sometimes we have to teach that, and it's a practiced thing.
Well, it's funny you would mention that, because I was actually thinking about the flip side of that very issue, because the OR is hard. We can be mean. Let's just be honest, and as experienced OR professionals, we don't always have the patience for the new people, because we have forgotten what it's like. We've forgotten that we didn't know that, because we've always known that. And how dumb are you that you don't know that, right? And because we get so comfortable in our own experience, and because we get so, I don't know, sometimes I think it's because abused people abuse, right? Like, people were mean to us, so I'm going to be mean to you. And like, I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. And as much as the person with the question has a responsibility to ask, the person being asked the question has the responsibility to be open and accepting, and to create a space where the person asking feels comfortable to ask. It shouldn't be that the person who didn't know something didn't ask because they were so afraid they were going to get their head bit off that they just didn't ask because everybody was so freaking mean. And unfortunately, that is where we find ourselves time and time again. But so I really think that this conversation is twofold. It's the be willing to ask. Don't be afraid to ask when you don't know something, because the patient's life could be at stake. But dadgummit, look at my South coming through. Dadgum. Don't be the mean person who won't answer the question, or don't close that, or don't make it impossible for somebody to learn because you're not approachable. Like, you have that experience. Your responsibility is to pass that on to the next group of people coming through, not to hoard it and hold it so that nobody else knows how to do something, right? That is the balance that we really need to find when it comes to, they need to know stuff and we need to be responsible for teaching it too.
Yeah, and I think that's a culture that is set by administration and by leadership. Because if you have a culture of fear and of retribution, then that's what you're setting, right? Like, nobody is ever going to come with a question, or I think that I may not have handled this correctly, because they're always going to be in a mindset of hiding for fear that they may lose their job, or they may, have negative consequences. And when you set, each individual on the team against one another, then you're never going to develop what could be that beautiful, well orchestrated dance that's when our patients are being best taken care of. And so I tell my students the best way to start a conversation is with gratitude. I think that's the best way to start your day, period, right? Like, number one, be grateful you woke up in the first place. Amen.
Yeah, but amen.
I think that, but I don't know, today's to-do list. but honestly, like, first thing you do is say thank you for the opportunity to be in that room. And may I ask you a question?
Ah, that's a good one.
Bam, right? Like, and now, and then also wait for them to answer you. Like, that drives me crazy. So thank you. may I ask you a question? And then let them say yes, because they may only have 2 seconds to shove 1 graham cracker and that little spoonful of peanut butter before they've got to go take care of the next patient, right? So like honor their time. And if they can't answer you right now, like we're in that world full of cell phones where they expect an answer right then, right now, because that's the world we live in. If they can't answer you, write it down. For the love of God, use a pencil.
Pen and paper. You have a turn card somewhere around you.
Holy crap, right? But write it down and then come back to them later, but don't just blow it off and not get the answer because it couldn't come to you right then. And that concept is a bit mind-blowing for some age groups. Like, just because I couldn't get it right then when I wanted it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be answered. So there's responsibility, like you said, on both parts. What's crazy is that it's just as much of a responsibility as it is to teach aseptic technique and those things. It is just as much my responsibility to teach those kinds of communication and professionalism skills to our students. And that's hard to do in what little, I've got 6 months before my students ever touch a patient. And then, so can you imagine that for nursing students? Because you all have a completely different curriculum that you all have to learn. And most of you, once you've learned all of the things you have to do, then you go and you specialize into an operating room where y'all didn't even get a day in the OR.
Yep.
And then,
just do it. It's just nursing, right?
Yeah. It's just, and then, you can scrub in. Anybody can do it. Here. Yeah, throw some instruments at a surgeon. It's not that hard.
Okay, listen,
right?
listen. That is totally what happened with me. So I've been in the OR for, I don't know. When I started in the OR that I started at, they did not teach nurses to scrub. So my orientation was simply to learn how to circulate, which I hate that because I really don't feel like you fully grasp the full role of the OR if you don't know how to scrub, learn your instruments, all those things. But that's another soapbox for another episode.
Go through surgical
for another
technology.
Day. Exactly.
I'm just
right?
Gonna say.
Yeah, exactly. Because when we learn to scrub, we don't learn all the things that our surgical tech students who went through a good program learn. But that's also another soapbox for another day. Let me get on with my story. I'm getting distracted. But anyway, so I'd been working in the OR for 5 or 6 years, and I'd moved to another OR that was an academic medical center. And so, of course, they have a huge focus on learning and on education. And if you wanted to learn to scrub, they did not train their nurses to scrub during orientation. But once you got off of orientation, if there was free time, if we were done with the day and there was a few cases going, if you took it upon yourself, you could stay at work and learn to scrub and do whatever. And I was the team leader for orthopedics. But I couldn't help our scrubs because I didn't know how to scrub. Like, I'm supposed to be your team leader. I'm supposed to make sure you get breaks and lunches, but I don't know how to scrub. That seemed really hypocritical to me. So I went to a couple of the scrubs that were patient and nice. And they did. They taught me the basics. I could open a case. I could close, pass suture, do those things so that they could get breaks. They could get lunches. They could do those things. And then they could come in and save the day and do the hard stuff in the case that I didn't know how to do. But I was passable at least at that point so that I could actually help everybody on my team and not just the nurses. Anyway, fast forward like a month and, I've been able to give some breaks, been able to give some lunches. I'm doing my thing. And then the charge nurse was like, "You're going to go scrub that total hip." I'm like, "That's a total hip. I don't know how to do that." She goes, "But you've been scrubbing." I'm like, "I've been passing suture." Like, I don't know. Now, what I found out is what everybody else says. If you've got a good rep, you could do anything. And man, I made it through that total hip and I had a fantastic rep. And he did. He every step of the way we were going along.
Earned his paycheck.
He did. And so like those situations where we find ourselves completely over our head, completely just buried. And it wasn't even a case where I could say no. Like people are like, "Well, just refuse. Tell them you won't do it." I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really work that way. Unfortunately, I don't get to say no. And so here we go team. We're going to make it happen. Those situations are the kind where you're just like, okay, it's been thrown at me. What can I learn from it? And then who can I go find to help me process it and learn it more so that I don't experience this again. And I know I'm not the only one who has experienced just let me put you in a slingshot and throw you completely into a case unprepared. But those aren't ideal. They're not the best situations for anybody, patient or the person having to do it, but they do happen. And so being prepared with the knowledge that says, okay, I need to learn something. I got to figure out how to do it. I might not learn it beforehand, so let me learn it after. But how do we ask those questions? How do we find out? How do we know? How do we learn what we don't know, right? And knowing how to do it well and navigate that is interesting.
It is. And at the end of the day, you know what worked well for you is, number one, you're not a jerk. and I'm honestly, and number two, you knew who the expert in that particular
always know who
area
your
was.
experts are. Yeah.
And that's why it takes a team. That's why it takes a village to take care of our patients. And if we respect each other's position and we are kind and we go at it with an open heart, and I think that's the key, right? Because at the end of the day, like, none of us are going to know everything all the time, but we have to talk to each other. We have to tell each other, and we have to be willing to say, I don't know what I'm doing, because it doesn't matter how well trained you are. I am really well trained. I know things, but guess what? You put me in an orthopedics case. That's not the best thing to ever do.
Exactly. Exactly.
And ever.
I
can stay sterile.
Yeah, I can stay sterile. I can patch your sutures.
But that vendor is going to earn every single dollar sign because I'm not an orthopedics person. So, but it's okay. Like, nobody knows everything. And if you can't get past your own ego to admit that, it doesn't matter what role you play, the person that's going to end up like being, suffering the most is going to be the patient. So
yeah, stay humble. You're never going to know everything. And
heck no.
Swallow that ego when it comes to asking a question, and swallow that bite when it comes to answering the question. I think together, combining those, no matter what situation we're in, we're going to find ourselves with a better operating room that's more well equipped with people who are free to ask questions, but also more educated when it comes to providing the best care for our patients. So that is going to do it for this very first episode of the season. Stay tuned next week, because we are going to talk to Dr. Pierce McCarty, and we're going to learn straight from the surgeon how best to communicate with our surgeons. You don't want to miss it. So on behalf of Chris, myself, and our whole team, thanks for listening to this episode of First Case.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts, and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.